Welcome, welcome. Okay, so let's kick things off. Hello and welcome to today's CEU webinar offered exclusively to ILFI's member community. I will turn it over to our speakers for today after a few quick announcements. So while we're getting started, please go ahead and introduce yourselves in the Zoom chat. You can mention where you're calling in from, maybe some professional details, and I'll get us started. My name is Liz Harder. I am ILFI's Member Engagement Director, and I'm calling in from St. Paul, Minnesota. And we encourage you all to use the Zoom chat liberally today. We love to see folks using the chat to connect with each other, ask questions during the session. There won't be a formal audience Q&A, but we'll be able to answer some questions in the chat as they're received. And we'll also be sure to continue the conversation in our member discussion board after the webinar ends, if there are still questions or thoughts to be shared. So today's webinar is part of a series that we're running this week, covering case studies from each petal or performance area of the Living Building Challenge. If you've missed the other webinars this week, no worries, you'll be able to find the recordings in your member dashboard in our new member resource library. Now to quickly cover the CEUs that you are earning by being here today. Our objectives for today's webinar are to learn about the intent and requirements of the LBC Health and Happiness, Equity, and Beauty petals. We're going to learn about strategies and resources for achieving each of these petals from the ETSI headquarters, the Kendeda Building, and Turner Construction headquarters project team members. And by attending today's webinar, you're earning 1 LFA general credit and 1 AIA LUHSW. And instructions for CEU reporting for AIA and LFA will be included in an email that I'll send to everyone after the webinar. So with that, I will hand it over to Ava Calvano, ILFI's education specialist, to introduce the Health and Happiness petal.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you, Liz. As Liz said, we have a jam-packed lineup today with 3 whole project presentations, so I'm going to do my best to keep these petal overviews short. And if you're looking for more details, we do encourage you to check out your member dashboard and download those petal handbooks. So we're starting today with the Health and Happiness petal. This petal is all about prioritizing the well-being of building occupants. In LBC 4.0, it comprises 3 imperatives: healthy interior environment, healthy interior performance, and access to nature. Healthy interior environment requires your basic best practices for occupant health, particularly through indoor air quality strategies. And this is the petal's 1 core imperative, which means it's required for both LBC and core certification. It covers ASHRAE 62 compliance or its equivalent. It has smoking prohibitions. It has exhaust requirements for certain spaces. It requires the development of a healthy indoor environment plan. And it also has some minimum daylight and views requirements. The healthy interior performance imperative then takes these best practices a step further. The daylight and views requirements are ramped up, and we also add CDPH compliance for VOC emitting products, post-occupancy indoor air quality testing, or continuous monitoring. We have requirements for operation cleaning protocols, and then there are also some mix and match strategies that include things like operable windows, flexible sit-stand spaces, and occupant thermal comfort controls. And then finally, we have the access to nature imperative, which, as you can imagine, requires that project teams find opportunities to connect building occupants with nature, both outside the building and within. And taken all together, these 3 imperatives are ensuring that we're not only enhancing the quality of our buildings, but also working to protect and to enrich the lives of the people who inhabit them. Our first case study today is the ETSI headquarters project. This was actually an LBC 3.1 project, so the health and happiness requirements looked a little different at the time. But we feel that this design team and also the owner were so committed to the occupant experience and really thought above and beyond the requirements, to the point that we think this project still really stands out as a model for other project teams looking for inspiration on the health and happiness petal today. So we're very excited to have you here, David. And with that, I'll pass it off to you.
So can everyone, hopefully everyone can see my screen now. So my name is David Briefel, and I'm a sustainability director at Gensler. And as Ava mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the Etsy project, which is really one of my favorite one in my career thus far. This project was completed in 2016, as was mentioned, and pursued the materials health petal and the health petal. So I'll be talking primarily about the health petal, but there was obviously a lot done beyond the health petal on this project. This is the fantastic team that worked on it. There's quite a few names. I'm not going to mention them all, but it really took a team effort to pull this off. So this is the project. If you're not familiar with Dumbo as a location, it's located in Dumbo, Brooklyn. It's about 200,000 square feet, and it's in the former Jehovah's Witnesses printing press building, which is just across the East River from downtown Manhattan. The project had a lot of unique scope to it. It was primarily an office space, but had 3 terraces, a library, garden, meditation room, a whole auditorium, a food service area, security and gallery, reception, bike storage, a wood shop, and a wellness suite to go along with many other amenities in the building. The project was really unique in the way that we started out the project and the way that we engaged with their community. We did a ton of visioning with them, and they had such a strong ethos. We really wanted to capture that and make sure that that was communicated in the design. So we did a lot of working sessions with them, and then this photo is an example of an actual really egalitarian process where we presented back the design concepts throughout the design process. And this one was actually in the space before it was built, so that their community knew what we were doing the whole time. And out of those visioning sessions came some really strong principles. So you can see them here: celebration of making, a narrative journey, green embrace, and a really strong material story. And so all of this led us down the path of looking at Living Building Challenge as a really nice framework and structure for delivering this project. And beyond that, really looking at the health petal as a primary backbone to the design of this project. So in order to talk about the health petal for this project, I'm going to sort of tell it using 3 parts. One is designing for daylight and views. The second part is programming for health, and the third part is really materials makers and education and advocacy. So we'll first start out with designing for daylight and views, and this is actually one of my favorite photos to use for the project, not only because it's a great example of daylight and views and has a nice green wall in it, but it also has my dog Fred, who coincidentally also loves daylight. So starting with daylight and views, one of the most important things that we could have done is actually select the location of the project. And this will come as no surprise when you're working on tenant fit outs. You're beholden to the architecture that you're in. And with this project, we looked at a lot of different sites before we settled on this one. There were a lot of important factors for Etsy to select the right project, and daylight was a really key component, along with floor heights, which also impacted the project's daylight and access to views and lease span. As you start to look at the floor plates, you can get a sense of why it was attractive. In order to meet the requirement at the time, we had to be within 41 feet of operable windows. And you can see that there was really only a small sliver of the core that was exempt for that. And so we tucked a lot of the program and a lot of the spaces that didn't have that direct access to daylight in that way. And we made sure it was a fairly open plan. You can see more pictures as you move up the stack, that there was really great access to daylight. And these are things that we also considered as we did all of the programming of the space and the rooms, and also the location of the plants to make sure that they had plenty of access to daylight. And you'll see that that's an important component as we move through the design of this project. And here you can see the operable windows in the existing building. So the second part is really talking about programming for health. And so through early design concepting, we started to really look at a couple of key components. We were looking at the open and closed collaboration space. They're a tech company and wanted to make sure that they could bring people into this space, but they still had privacy in their closed collaboration areas. And we also always talked about the importance of food at Etsy and sort of the communal areas that happened around food and the access that people had to it. So it became a really strong central planning principle. And then as we got a little bit further along, we started to layer in other components like a very robust local art program that they brought in, as well as access to greenery in the space and also views to greenery outside the space. And one of the key planning principles was to make sure that everyone from a seated position had access to a view of some of the interior greenery. So you can imagine that was quite a bit of planning to think about where this would go and how you might situate that kind of programming. And you can see this is the results of some of the space. This is a view towards one of the floors where there's the communal eating area in front of the pantry, along with the greenery, which is accessible there, and the wonderful daylight and the wonderful views from there. We also included programming that was really important for them to be able to have an entry that would bring people up into the space from the ground level, and really encourage people to use it. And this was the stairs were built from reclaimed wood from a water tower on the existing building. This, I think, is really unique as part of Etsy's culture. Today we see a lot of mechanized sit-stand tables, but part of the Etsy culture was to do it analog. And you can see here in this image, each Etsy employee was sort of given a customized stand for where they want it to be sit-stand, both for the laptop and for their monitor. And so this is a very Etsy version of a sit-stand desk option. And they also have a wonderful food program, which they offer, and I'm probably going to mess this up, but I think it's either 2 or 3 times a week. It's been a little while since we completed the project, and that I've been over there to get food. But it's a fantastic food program. It's local organic food. And then the rest of the days of the week, they really want to encourage their employees to get out into the community and also move around, but also give back to their community and not be insular. And then they have a extremely one of the nicest bike storage rooms that I've experienced, with plenty of daylight also for the bikes. And then they celebrate this in a very Etsy way with this sort of analog tracking mechanism. But it's highly used, and anytime you go over there, you see this bike room is packed. And then the third part of the health story is really talking about the materials, the makers, the education, advocacy for this project. And this was really the thing that I think made this project extremely unique, is their engagement with makers at all levels of the project. So through furniture manufacturers, through the lighting, through the art, and then through the greenery. They really tried to employ local companies that are small, relatively startup, to be able to deliver this in a way that was aligned with their mission as a company. And you can see some of the examples of some of these companies here. A good example here is Parts and Labor, which I think got renamed during this project to First Third. And they basically fabricated all of the workstations for this entire 200,000 square foot project, which is a pretty amazing feat to be able to pull off at this kind of scale. And so you can imagine when we're working with these makers to ensure not only that these products are being made to a standard that's applicable to a project of this type and can meet the warranties, but also to make sure that they met all of the red list requirements and the health requirements. So in order to do that, we set up these maker workshops where we work with them. We actually engaged ILFI as part of the workshops. We brought in some other folks. FSC came and talked to them. And we went through all the requirements in detail and made sure that they really knew what they were doing and they didn't have any questions, and then worked them through the requirements. As you can imagine, we also had to write our specs so that they incorporated all of this language. So there's a big spec editing process that went along with this project. And altogether, because of the scale and the size of this project, we had about 31 pages altogether of materials, over 1,000 materials that we were tracking. And this resulted in some really amazing reuse that you can see here, compliance with red lists and local manufacturing. And then on the CDPH end, this is what it looked like. So we had about 148 materials that complied with CDPH out of the 201, which equated to about an 80% compliance rate. And so for the remaining 20%, we tried really hard and we advocated to at least 3 different manufacturers to ensure that we had done proper advocacy. And we were able to get some people to adopt CDPH, but at the end we weren't able to get to 100%. And then when we talk about project impact, this project obviously impacted the people that worked at Etsy, and we got some really amazing feedback from folks after the project was done. You can see that they appreciated the project. We also did some informal surveying and looked at their Instagrams to see who was posting what and what they really liked about it, which was really interesting. But I think just to bring this full circle, one of the things that we had talked about with Etsy very early on with Josh Wise, who was their facility director at the time, was that one of the reasons they engaged Gensler is because they wanted to make sure that there was a mutual learning process and that we also benefited from the project. So as they pushed on the project for themselves, they were also pushing us, and that we would then in turn learn from that project and spread it around. And I think the example of our Gensler product sustainability standard, which will go into place in January, is a really good example of this, where we can draw on, some of our experience from Etsy was fundamental in getting us this place of being able to have a standard that we can offer. And you'll see if you look through it that CDPH is one of the things we track for a bunch of material categories. So with that, I think I'll stop here and thank everyone for attending and turn it over to the next presentation.
Thanks so much, David. That was excellent. And I believe David's at a conference right now and is in a corner of a hotel room. So we're especially grateful that he was able to join us today. All right, so I've got to keep rolling. We're going to turn our attention now to the equity petal. And this is a big one. The equity petal is a cornerstone of the Living Building Challenge. It has 2 imperatives, and both of these are core imperatives, again, meaning that they're required for both core and LBC projects. First, we have the universal access imperative, and I'm going to go through the requirements pretty quickly. It says that all primary transportation, roads, and externally focused non-building infrastructure, think benches or plazas, must be equally accessible to all members of the public, background, age, socioeconomic class notwithstanding. It says that depending on your project type and location, you may be required to enhance the public realm through features like public art and street furniture and things of that nature. It also says that your project must meet ADA or ABA guidelines or must follow the principles of universal design or any international equivalent that ensures equitable access for those with physical disabilities. And finally, it says that your project cannot obstruct or diminish access to fresh air, sunlight, or natural waterways for neighboring buildings or the general public. In short, living buildings should not be built in a manner that benefits some while excluding or taking from or harming others. Moving on to the inclusion imperative, we start to look more closely at the project team. This imperative requires that at least 2 project team organizations have a JUST label, which is ILFI's nutrition label for socially just and equitable organizations. And it also requires that an additional 5 organizations on the team complete what's called a JUST self-assessment. Then project teams have a choice. They can either work to ensure that a certain number of their contracts are furthering the diversity of the team by being MWDBE orgs or by being JUST labeled organizations that meet the diversity category requirements, or they can also engage with workforce development agreements or apprenticeship programs. Or as their second option, they can make a donation to a regional community-based nonprofit. Or of course, they can do both. Our next case study is the Kendeda Building, whose equity story comes up all the time as a really awesome example of what good looks like. This was another 3.1 project, and at the time, workforce development was not written into the standard to the extent that it is now. But as Jimmy's going to tell us, the Kendeda team was ready to go beyond the 3.1 LBC requirements on this topic. So I'll go ahead and I'll pass the mic to you, Jimmy. Thanks for being here.
Seva, yeah, Jimmy Mitchell. Like David said, the Kendeda Building, similarly to Etsy, it was an amazing team effort. The architect here is Lordick Sargent and Miller Hall Partnership. And so I'm glad they are having me here talking about equity. So the Kendeda Building is a fully certified Living Building Challenge project. It was the 28th, and it's under version 3.1. It is on Georgia Tech's campus in Atlanta, Georgia. In the fall and spring, over 1,100 students use the building every day, during class. And a couple of the program elements. There's a 180-person auditorium, which Georgia Tech really needed. This helps with some of their freshman classes, and it's great to give everybody on campus access to the building at some point because of that size of a classroom. Also, up there on the second floor, there's a couple of 60-person classrooms, which is also a very big need. for the Georgia Tech campus, in particular, also after hours graduate classes, which helps with a little bit of access as well for students. When I worked for Skanska, we were the general contractor, and the team really worked as an integrated team. We were involved in the design through the process and going through all the imperatives. These two images were very commonly shared as the team, discussing the difference between equality and equity. Looking at those boxes, you can see equality, everybody gets one box, but it's not necessarily a great experience. We can share the boxes in a way and everybody can see the ball game. So it was kind of fun to go through the imperatives and think about equity in each of them, as well as the equity imperatives generally. So as hitting on those universal access and inclusion, I went to the building. So we started construction in February 2018 and finished in October of 2019. And it really is living up to some of these as intended. This photo is great. You can see the bike racks being used. The kind of the new scooters are there too, and a student is enjoying the sunshine. Really a great human scale here. When you go into the building, the very front and center of the building is an ADA ramp. It is the popular thing to use. So whether you're disabled or not, you're going to use that ADA ramp. There are plenty of places where people feel like they can pause and feel at home, plug in and connect or disconnect as they wish. I have to say that this was a Friday afternoon, and it was just loaded with people enjoying themselves, doing what they wanted to do. So I think in terms of sometimes these big academic buildings are not welcoming, even beautiful one like Kendeda, but in this case, the students are feeling welcome, and there's even this spot in the basement next to the switchgear room that we show off with a glass wall of somebody kind of curled up in a chair and relaxing. In terms of the Just label, we did have 3 of the design consultants who had a Just label. One is Lord X Sargent right here in Atlanta, Georgia, the architect that's local. The other one is Miller Hall out of Seattle, and PAE out of Portland, Oregon. PAE was the MEP engineer to start the job off, and the local firm Newcomb Boyd finished it up. This is a picture that I love. There was, during the design process, when you're talking about urban agriculture and trying to figure out if it wanted to be raised beds or more of a foraging experience, there were actually entities on both sides of the argument that were pretty, strong from the project standpoint. And so it was a real conundrum, but equity ended up being the kind of the winning case here. We all felt it was much more equitable to have foraging landscape over raised beds. If you see those hot peppers and those raised beds, they feel like you can't touch them. But if you go on the side of the road and there's a blackberry patch, you can feel comfortable eating those and foraging and not feel like you're stealing or anything like that. It's very, very welcoming. And they try to do that here in their apiary and student programming on the rooftop garden and around the site. Sometimes the equity too, it's a really good point of progress to think over the long term and see if you're on track. I want to kind of criticize the rainwater to potable system. So in the Kendeda building, we have in the basement a water treatment plant. And so you can imagine a future where we follow this, and Georgia Tech has its own potable water system. And maybe so does Emory and the airport and Oglethorpe and the rich neighborhood in Sandy Springs where I live. And we all have our own little district potable water system. What would happen potentially to a city of Atlanta's overall water system if that were the case? It would potentially lead to a very unequitable situation where rich communities who can afford their own little potable water system get drinking water, and the poor communities in between don't, because the whole system degrades. So it's also really good to think about what we're doing overall through an equity lens, because stuff like this might uncover where our ambitions may need to lie in terms of, hey, where is the right place to apply a rainwater to potable water small district system? So in terms of the challenge, our project within the spirit of the equity petal had a lot going on. The site was placed on an 8-acre site that was surface parking, and now it's a park and the Kendeda Building. That land included an old Pickwick diner, which is famous in 1964. This terrible man, Lester Maddox, wouldn't allow black folks into the diner and made a big ordeal out of it with a gun and his son with a bat. And this is actually on our basically on our site. He he took that as a political opportunity and became the governor of Georgia in 1967. Georgia Tech had nothing to do with this, but it's interesting that we've got, they took it over and turned it into the beautiful park that it is now. Additionally, looking at the upper left-hand corner, the city of Atlanta as a region, that color coding is kind of where the white population is versus the non-white population. And in the lower left-hand corner is a color map of unemployment rates. This was done a few years ago by the Partnership for Southern Equity, a really great organization that tracks this here in Atlanta. And you can see that the high area of unemployment is really concentrated in a small section of Atlanta that is south and west of campus. Over here on the right-hand side in Atlanta, we call them neighborhoods K, L, and T. They're zip codes that have been going through some issues and blight over the years. And so Georgia Tech does have hundreds of people employed in those from those neighborhoods, but as a percentage of all the folks they hire, it's probably lower than it needs to be. And so Georgia Tech's been focusing on trying to engage with that community to both in terms of for students and for employment on campus. Just looking at the Black population, which is the majority of the folks in that southwest of campus, from the state of Georgia, over 30% of our residents are African American, and about 8% of Georgia Tech students are African American. That cross engineering school is actually very, very impressive, but there's still work to do when you look at it compared to the state of Georgia. So looking at solutions, Georgia Tech had a couple of faculty members of note. One is Michael Gamble and the other is Jenny Hirsch. And they really wanted to, especially with our civil rights history in Atlanta with Martin Luther King and others, do an exercise of additional planning around equity. And so the Kendeda Building is really viewed as an asset in the community, and it encourages classrooms and students in thinking within engineering and design of how community assets can be improved. So a lot of the students who have classes in the Kendeda Building will go out into other community members and improve on those existing assets, really in service of them. But in this, before the project was established, there were 6 things that were really kind of a desire that the Kendeda Building would improve upon. And they're listed here, but one that I'm going to dig into is local hiring. And so this is a beautiful picture taken by Maki Kasiki right after the structure was done. And what you see here is the glue laminated columns and beams and the nail laminated timber panels right after they were installed. So those panels are a structural 2x6 nailed to a 2x4 repeated throughout. And one really interesting thing about that, the requirement for the challenge made this needed to be FSC wood if it was new. But because those 2x4s were just spacers, they could also be salvaged. And as you can imagine, as somebody going to as the leader of pre-con for the project, it was hard to get pricing to do these panels with FSC and salvage. So I made this mock-up here to help determine the self-performing it and how it would be cost competitive. Ended up saving the project $800,000 by us doing it ourselves. And one result of that was not only could we get the product that the design team wanted to have and within budget, but we needed a lot of carpenters to build these panels. We built them on a table, one at a time, about 6 foot. And so for 50 cents more an hour, we engaged with Georgia Works, a formerly incarcerated and homeless workforce development program for men. And we trained 6 of them over the course of 6 men over the course of 4 months to make 489 panels. And at the end, they had a resume in construction. Kenyatta there on the left is a good story. We went to hire him, and he ended up taking a better job with somebody else pretty quickly. So that's him and the graduation of their Georgia Works program. Another great thing that's similar is reuse in general. I talked about the 2x4s and the panels where we collected that. We had 28 items that we salvaged at Kendeda, based on the 1 for every 500 square meter requirement. We needed 8 or 9, but we did 28. This is slate tile that we incorporated as wall tile. And then the first building that Georgia Tech built was the Tech Tower. There was a renovation of that. We got some of the old joist material and we used it, the stair treads. I mention this because in addition, a Life Cycle Building Center is a local nonprofit that was a great partner in the process of building Kendeda. Anytime they have a mission rooted in reuse of construction materials, and they also engage with workforce development. This is Tracy Young, who is a gentleman who worked for Life Cycle when we were doing Kendeda, and he was hired for them full time at the time of the project, and also came from the Georgia Works program. So, being thoughtful in the process of building it, we engaged both within Skanska and with some of our partners in workforce development. One amazing intended consequence is that at the end of the project, the weight of the material that we reused in the building was 57,000 pounds, and the weight of the material that we sent to the landfill in the process of building it was 48,000 pounds. So when we were done building the project, there was less material in the landfill because we built it. So looking kind of back into the future, that nonprofit Life Cycle Building Center still engages in workforce development. And this spring in 2023, formed a coalition of partners, many of which came from the Kendeda Building project, including Georgia Tech Serve, Learn, Sustain, and created a workforce program called Breaking Barriers. And so 20 folks entered a 4-week program, 2 weeks of soft skills training and 2 weeks of on-job training. This is them starting the barn deconstruction project in Roswell, Georgia, where they learned how to tear down a barn and save the materials for a future construction project, kind of one board at a time. And this is the picture after they're done getting rid of the barn. So it was a full structural decon. There is no barn there now. And the Kendeda Building hosted their graduation. 12 of the 20 made it through the 4-week program. And a couple of the ladies, women here in the picture, now have full-time jobs at Life Cycle Building Center. And the gentleman, Eric, on the far right is an advisory member at Life Cycle. So, here again, it was great to have this, the Living Building Challenge really encourages reuse. And that seems to be an imperative that really has a nice connection with equity in workforce development. So that's all I've got.
Awesome. Thank you, Jimmy.
Back to you, Ava.
Thank you. That was perfect. Thank you. So now we're going to pivot to the beauty petal. We're doing well on time, but I'll go through this quickly so that we can get our beauty petal team kicked off. So the beauty petal is one of the petals that has historically set the Living Building Challenge apart from other sustainable building certifications. It has 2 imperatives. Both are core imperatives, which again means that they're required for both core and LBC certification. The first imperative, beauty and biophilia, says that the team needs to spend at least 1 full day, it doesn't need to be all at once, exploring the biophilic design potential of the project. This exploration typically takes the form of a charrette or a workshop and must ultimately lead to the creation of 2 documents, a biophilic framework and a biophilic plan. Through these documents, ILFI needs to be able to see how the team explored the historical, the cultural, ecological, and climatic context of the site, and how that information was then used to incorporate biophilic principles into the design of the building. So light and space, natural shapes and forms, evolved human-nature relationships. If you've read any Stephen Kellert, or if you've taken ILFI's Foundations of Biophilic Design certificate, these biophilic design principles might sound familiar. The second imperative is the education and inspiration imperative, and it's all about amplifying your project's impact by sharing your story. It requires that the team develop a case study, host an open day for the public every year, install interpretive signage, and other things of that nature. This is also the imperative that requires you to have a Living Future accredited professional on your project team. Of all the petals, this is the one where our project coaches are most often asked, where do I even start? This next case study is a commercial office interior fit out for Turner Construction. It's a 4.0 project, and we were really impressed with the commitment that this team brought to the table when it came to this petal. They embraced the beauty petal, they prioritized it, and they used it to create a new workplace that is very truly impressive. So with that, I'll say we're very proud to pass the mic to this Gensler and Turner team to wrap up our case studies webinar series.
Thank you, Ava. And we will pull this up. So Turner's headquarters. I'm joined here today with Lisa from Turner, and we're going to be taking you through our overall process and kind of unpacking a little bit more of what we did to bring this to life. First, we'd like to set a little bit of context. We are currently, we just received our LEED Platinum certification. We're pending WELL Platinum, and we're submitting for Living Building Challenge Core. The overall project team, I wanted to share first that we co-designed the space with a WMBE firm, Studio 397. It was founded by Samantha Josephat, and Samantha named her firm being the 397th African-American female architect to receive licensure in the United States. Along with Studio 397, we had a really great balance of consultants and trades overall, with really great overall participation of 60.9% for supplier involvement from WMB firms. And Lisa's going to take us through a little bit of the context of the project itself.
Yes. So starting with the site selection of the spiral for the location of Turner's new headquarters and New York office, we sought to incorporate our culture and overall core values into the project at all levels, with a focus to create a healthy and productive and enjoyable workspace for all of our employees. This focus informed Turner's decision to seek Core Green Building certification, which through the imperatives embodies Turner's active caring culture. And today we're going to focus on the beauty petal biophilia in our space. Turner's office needed to be a place that fosters a culture where all people actively care for one another, where they feel they are a part of something extraordinary. Our project from inception to completion was guided by creating the right environment and to allow people to do their best work and bring their whole selves to work.
And that really informed going for Core and the beauty petal, and really reinforcing their active caring culture and what that would mean for their future headquarters here in New York City. Our process began with 2 biophilic design workshops. As Ava mentioned, we did break it up into 2 days, and we'll unpack that a little bit to share with you what that meant. We were in the middle of a pandemic, so this was done virtually. We hosted it on a digital whiteboard, Miro. You can see it kind of ghosted behind the screen, but it was really great for bringing all the consultants together to really inform what this vision should be, as well as their employees. To kind of share with you a little bit about our process, we started with the agenda, for the first session, really introducing what biophilic design is. So all of our consultants, this included the acoustical consultants, the engineers, and everybody involved who have different ranges of knowledge, really what it means. And then we started looking at how we narrow it down into different biophilic attributes. We also did this through a series of different breakout sessions and workshops, and then really explored what those biophilic elements look like and how that could look in the design. And we also focused on an overall mission statement for what this would mean for the project as a whole. In the first workshop, we broke into 3 different groups. We had 30 minutes of activities of talking about, what some of the different features meant and what would hold the most importance to the design of the space. It's good to note too, we were nearing the end of schematic design, so the planning was kind of getting set. We were really looking to make sure that as we moved into the three-dimensional design and bringing all these components together, that this was a part of that process and not an afterthought. We also, as part of the second session, brought in some different project experts. One was Eric Sanderson, a historical ecologist that was really able to share New York City's ecological history and inspire our conversations. Rebecca Boline, founder of Greenery NYC. We ultimately, as a result of her participation, hired her as a consultant, and she did all the greenery on the project. Also, David, when he presented Etsy earlier, she also completed that project as well. She's been a great partner on many projects. And Christina Grace from the Food Print Group, which gave insights around food. In that second workshop, we revisited the overall biophilic mission statement. Eric spoke. We actually had all our speakers in this session. Part of it was based on availability. If you're doing these, sometimes it is good to break them up, but this is how it landed for us. But it was a really great inspiring day of open conversation. And we went through some of the more co-creation. So this session really focused more on how we looked at how it could really take effect in the design. And Lisa, if you'd like to share the mission statement.
Yes, I'm going to read it directly the way it's on the screen. The Turner, New York office will be an inclusive haven that actively cares for employees and the environment. By implementing biophilic design attributes such as integration of plants, natural light, views and vistas, geographic connection to place, botanical motifs, bounded spaces, and age change and patina over time, the Turner, New York office will be an engaging, energizing, and enjoyable experience that fosters inspiration, collaboration, and connection.
Thank you. So the biophilic design strategies, here we created a report from those workshops. So everybody really could look at what the actions would be to bring this vision to reality. And so from here, we looked at the different application of elements. We created ownership with the different teams. Tenfold was focused on our environmental graphics and visual communication. These were some of the inspiration images, like looking at how that ecology of the brand could take shape within the space and inform those layers. How we could take a look at different natural patterns and ownership of what that meant with Studio 397 and Gensler, as well as through different aspects of the lighting. And then Lisa will take us through the next few.
For this one, the environmental features and light and space, locating the plants. The action was taken by Greenery NYC, which was awesome, and Lumen, Studio 397, and Gensler to select products and to consider what planters we would use and how we would filter light through those plants. Next. Okay, and then this one with human nature relationships and natural patterns and processes. Turner, like our quest for continuous improvement and testing new things out, design and build for future, our group wanted to include change and metamorphosis, like the age, change, and patina of time. So Greenery NYC was tasked with the species and plant placement, allowing for growth and change over time. And Studio 397 and Gensler owned finding the finishes and furniture that shows this. For natural shapes and forms that mimic nature, the desire for Turner to offer the proven benefits between human and nature in our workplace was evident when this element surfaced as a priority in our biophilic design strategy. Lumen took the lighting elements for their action, and Studio 397 and Gensler focused on natural shapes and forms with the finishing selections. And then here we're showing the successful implementation of the biophilic elements of lighting and ceiling finish to mimic a forest canopy, the natural wood slats with a forest image behind it to simulate trees, and the greenery throughout to feel as if you are sitting in a park connected to nature. This happens to be my favorite space. And then we leverage the daylighting studies for optimal locations for natural light to inform the placement of our natural plantings, particularly focused where our people spent most of their time.
So as he looked at arrival, this was a rendering as we started developing more around vistas and views and the things that came from the different attributes that came from the overall workshops, and then how that really started to come to life in the overall context of the space, how we started looking at, also the naming conventions of the room with the Central Park conference rooms and the amazing backdrop of the city for this office, as well as the focus rooms and looking at, pattern and how we started layering in different materiality and choice within those environments. The overall vistas and views, again, from all workplace with natural light coming into the space, but again, just highlighting the, spatial variability, plants, geographic connection, always kind of having a sense of where you are in the environment. And how that really tied into the overall workday. Always kind of having a place where your eye can go out and just kind of take a moment in the context and craziness of New York City. The integration of plants and depth and views. And again, spaces that really were for everybody. So, offering those types of choice and, not preserving a view for one, for certain people, but always making access for everyone. And the way the natural light comes into the space. And areas for team building where they do lots of different gatherings. Lisa?
Yes, and here, Tenfold use our exterior windows to frame and display Turner's landmarks. And they're sprinkled throughout the office space to honor Turner's work and to connect the visitors to Turner's history and to learn about the city. It's really a great example of geographic connection to place, climate, and culture. The image from the mural board during our workshop, the sustainability material included in the botanical motifs are plants, natural shapes and forms. The climbing plants that grow and over time change, all selected to make you feel like you're outside and to create areas that allow you to experience the space in very different ways. And here, because of the natural wood and metal, the plants give our employees a feeling of satisfaction, inspiration, and well-being. And it represents that patina of time. And then here, this is the heart of the office, our work cafe. It's a bustling hub with a feature stair and a variety of seating options that supports wellness and serves as a space for informal gatherings and events, like the material selection and plants by Greenery NYC, and plant species selections change over time. And then the lighting in the ceiling here and material selection contribute to Turner's Park in the Sky. This happens to be my favorite space in our office. And this shows you why. Here's an example of the work cafe serving as our gathering space for community-based events. It's such a dynamic space with our diversity and inclusion branding wall, the New York skyline, and the forest park in the sky framing all of the action. From the top left, there's Turner. We planted 15,000 annuals and perennials at the Bella Abzug Park across the street from the building for Founders Day and as a active partner in Hudson Yards Hell's Kitchen community.
And another snapshot from the mural board from the workshop, looking at the ability for, greenery to adapt and grow, thinking about the integration of those elements. And here you're catching that snippet. The plants are alive and well and allowing for the different breakouts. Also being mindful to the needs and respite of staff with a prayer room, with a foot bath, also the mother's lactation room as well, but just thinking about what people need throughout their day and how we provide that type of respite. And a quote from Mike. And with that, whoa, I skipped our page. Oh, something happened here. I didn't see that we had a bit of a fail with our team page, but perfect last night. But anyway, thank you.
Yes, Turner's grateful to the amazing, talented, and diverse team that we brought a unique, inclusive experience to the project from concept all the way through to completion. And it made the process really exciting and very fun, especially during the biophilic design workshops, which happened to be my favorite 2 days of the project. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Lisa. That was great.
Absolutely. And I really want to give credit to the team. So I'm going to pull over a PDF I had on the side. And it's not, oh, Lord. Uh-oh. What happened? That's what happened. Everything just went black.
Well,
This
while you're
is-
working on that, if it's okay, we actually have a few minutes left over because all of our presenters today were so stellar at time management. So if anyone has any questions in the audience, feel free to drop them in the chat, but I'll go ahead and get us started with one. And working backwards, this is for Lisa and Stephanie. I'm curious if you encountered any reluctance or skepticism or negative vibes about biophilic design when you first started exploring it and when you first opened up your charrettes. And if you did, if you didn't, great. But if you did, how did you deal with that?
I didn't hear anything. I think we had a lot of curious people at first, especially there's a lot of consultants with different, types of experience. So for them, it might have been like, what exactly are we doing? But we felt like everybody was really open to the process. I don't know if Lisa, you'd like to add on to that.
Everything was driven by how we wanted our employees to feel, and how can you argue against being connected to nature? So to me, I didn't notice at all from top to bottom any issues or anybody putting a roadblock or being skeptical about us doing that, which was actually really wonderful.
That's great. Best case scenario, really. It looks like we have a question for Jimmy in the chat. Jimmy, I don't know if you're able to see it, but
Yeah, it's kind of a tough one about the challenges of getting a company to do a self-assessment for just. So Skanska has not done one. We're a large company, and we haven't chosen to do one, though we love ILFI and all the programming. The 3 companies that did do it are not as large. Office in Atlanta, Seattle, and Portland, and so maybe that was a little bit of an easier for them. It's good. It would be nice to I'll have that conversation with them, but I have found it difficult for such a large multinational company like Skanska to engage with it. Have you guys had success with very large companies to do the Just label? Because a lot of our smaller consulting partners are the ones who have been doing it. You know
Lisa,
that?
I don't know if you're on, but
Yeah. Yes. I thought you meant me, Lisa. And as Turner,
I think that makes sense. Lisa from Turner, please comment, because you all had to pursue this as well.
We're the same as Jimmy. It's very hard to get the larger companies to do so. And the smaller ones are definitely more apt to do it. And it's easier to get buy-in from all levels and transparency. I think there's certain aspects that keep us from doing it. I think we're slowly inching more and more as it gets closer. We released our ESGs this year, and with that, we're being a lot, we're able to be more transparent. And I think it's definitely on the table, but it's not an easy process. There's a lot of buy-in to get. And so that would be our take.
Yeah, I was just going to add from ILFI, we have now a repository of just labeled organizations. And I think DPR Construction actually just renewed their just label, and they're by far the largest organization that has pursued just. And they have over 10,000 employees, so it's possible, and certainly there are a range of organizations, range of sizes, and but yeah, just want to say it is possible.
We only have 5 minutes left. And if you don't mind, Jimmy, I have one more question for you. It's kind of a retooling of the question that I asked Lisa and Stephanie. When your team was making the decision to partner with Georgia Works, was that a partnership that you had before, or had you made other similar partnerships and other projects, or was that something new to the Skanska team? And how do people react to that? How are they feeling about trying out something new?
Construction is quite often does engage workforce development. There are things like the ACE program, high school students, mentoring college students, a lot with the trades. And so in the past, for example, I've engaged in workforce development with a workforce development kitchen close to the Grady Hospital project we worked on. For the Atlanta Mission Homeless Shelter, we had an urban garden where some of the men there went into the sod industry after they tended to the gardens. Though it is, this example was very unique and a different perspective, and it really did take the challenge to kind of think through the process. I am a founding board member of that nonprofit Lifecycle Building Center, and so have been, as a board member there, very engaged with life cycles engagement with workforce development. And they had an earlier partnership with Georgia Works, which really added to that involvement with that community organization, added a lot of viability to engaging with them on such a large commercial application. And that past experience kind of made it easy and made it available. So we had that as an option, and it came together really, really well. So I'm glad our team didn't shut it down. They were excited about engaging with it and making it happen.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Well, we're 3 minutes to the top of the hour. I see one final question in the chat. That's, what were your most unexpected lessons learned? So I think Jimmy, Lisa, and Stephanie, if you think you could answer that in like a quick 30-second answer, then we can try to squeeze that one in before we wrap up today.
I'll go first. So, when it comes to equity, I think lessons learned, I really have enjoyed seeing the students. There have actually been, classes centered in equity. And so I've gotten to mentor them because they keep, wanting me to tell them how the building process went along. And one of the unexpected delights has been seeing them love the project, also criticize parts of it, and really see the future potential from these students going on, and including equity into their design and engineering decisions.
I would say for us, the unexpected result is that energy that happens in that workspace cafe. It's so different from where we were before to where we are now as far as our office goes, and that energy and it transfers into meetings, it transfers into relationships, it transfers into the community, and it's just such a ripple effect for what happens in that office and how we bring that to our clients and to our partners. And it's really cool. It's a really neat side effect of what we did there, and it's great, and a lot of people are coming to celebrate different things in our space, and it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. Yep. And other lessons learned, Stephanie, her computer melted down, so she's sorry, but she's not able to get back on. So she apologizes for that.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your great questions and wonderful presentations. David, Jimmy, Lisa, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your projects with us. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their evening or day. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks. Hey.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.